my name is Travis. I'm an alcoholic and I'm an addict as well, and of a few different varieties, but mainly I'll talk about alcoholism here tonight. And thanks for the people doing service to the meeting, and for Chris for really asking me. I really appreciated that, and I hear people say that it's a really honour and a privilege to speak at an AA meeting of this kind. I don't really understand that, but that's fine. I find it a bit nerve-wracking, really, but that's really what my experience around, came to believe that a power greater than myself could restore us to sanity. And, prior to this chapter, there's a solution. We run against the prefaces in the book, and the very first preface that I read, it said that, the whole purpose of the book is to recover, and there's a plan that's in the book which we can recover by. And then getting into that doctor's opinion as well. When I read that, I read it on my own first off, and I didn't really make a lot of sense of it, but apart from reading about the obsession and then the phenomena of craving. But I'll just back up a little bit and tell you a little bit about me. So I'm not Thai, you can see that. I am from New Zealand. I was born to my parents in 1950, so that makes me 74 years old. So I'm an old dude. And I was one of 10, right? And growing up in that household was difficult. It was very arduous. My dad was a daily drunk, and my mum was the really, really devoted Irish Catholic woman that didn't want my dad to be a drunk. So we were caught in a war zone, basically. And as a kid, I kind of didn't know what to make of all that. But my first recollection of kind of that was to run away and hide and isolate, right? And I did that. I got into books primarily. I just got into reading. I got into isolating. I got into not being seen. I didn't want to be, not that I didn't want to be a part of, but I just didn't want to be seen because I didn't want to get in between these two warring adults that were going on. So, and I was where was I? I was in there. I was the fifth born. Sorry, I was the fifth. My mum had her hands full. My dad was no help. He was a merchant seaman, so he would hence the 10 kids probably. But so he didn't really have anything to do with us kids at all. Primarily, I never found him very approachable right through my whole life, actually, except when I got to be a teenager, when we could actually kind of relate to a little bit to each other. But again, I found that kind of difficult. So I think it's a fair summation to say that I kind of brought myself up a little bit, looking after myself, brought myself up, took myself off to school, come home from school, did my homework. And my mother did her best to try and keep me engaged in her religion, which I really resented. I really didn't like that. I hated going to churches on Sunday. I hated going to church events, and I hated the thought of being confirmed or being confirmed, taking that first communion and being confirmed, basically. So as soon as I could, I really, really disconnected myself from that religion. I really didn't want to borrow it because I didn't feel it did anything for me, so I didn't want to borrow it. And I became primarily self-reliant, just like it talks about in this book, all the way through this book, really self-reliant, and that was me. But I got to tell you, when I was 15 and I had my first serious drink of alcohol, I loved it straight away. I absolutely loved it. And I was with a couple of friends of mine who also loved the experience. But I wanted to keep on drinking, and they didn't. They wanted to go home. Now, I've got to tell you, I was 15 years old. We were in the middle of Auckland City. We sought out the seediest arcade, the darkest bar, and the non-interested barman. He couldn't care less whether we bought alcohol or not. He just didn't care. But the moment I had that first glass of beer, it was beer at that time, I absolutely loved it. Just changed my whole perspective, my whole thinking. I morphed into something else, and I didn't have a car, no transport, so my experience ended up rather disastrously going home on a big Mercedes bus and spewing up everywhere. So that wasn't a very pleasant experience, but I did survive it. Got home, and then on subsequent events, I turned up at my home drunk, and I can see my mum standing here now with her hands on her hip. She was quite a broad, stocky woman. She had a great smile. She had a great smile, but she wasn't smiling when I arrived home with a policeman in towing, and she says, I've got another one. And she didn't know, I didn't know really what she was talking about. But I do now, I was just like my dad, and I didn't know it. I'd become a drunk, and I didn't really know it at a fairly young age. But I had I had some fiscal responsibility, so I couldn't really manage to daily drink. So I became a serious binge drinker, and I just couldn't wait to actually start that process off on the weekend. So it would sometimes start Wednesday, Thursdays, Fridays, Saturdays, Sunday. You all know the routine. I don't have to tell you about the routine. You all know what it's like. And that became my kind of habit. And I wasn't really looking to stop. I was having a good time. Or so I thought, anyway. And but I drank for 15 years, so not too long. But midway through that, probably 10 years into that, I started to lose real control of my drinking. I really started to suffer a lot of blackouts. I became less and less interested in things that were around me. I became more and more interested in just drinking and getting that next drink. So my life was sort of pretty much centered around that. And also, I had gotten married in the meantime. I was a person that never should have gotten married, but I did. And she was a beautiful, absolutely beautiful woman or girl. We were both kids when we got married. But she was a beautiful person anyway. And try and get me to stop and moderate my drinking. And you know what? I absolutely adored her, and I would make all these outrageous promises to her that I could, that I would control my drinking. And then, the call would come, and I would just have to go out and drink. A friend would call around to the house, and I would say to them, I'm just going down for one. Yeah. And one ended up to be many ones. Anyway, fast forward really to the time that, I kind of set myself a bit of a line in the sand here, subconsciously. I thought to myself that if ever I became like my dad, I was going to quit. And I recognised that much later on in my drinking, right towards the end of my drinking, probably just 6 months before I came into Alcoholics Anonymous. And I was seriously trying to control my drinking here, not having any luck at all, suffering badly from, just really recovering from drinking. And but after one particularly bad New Year's in 1980, it was just the turn of 1980, I cut out an ad in the newspaper which referred to Alcoholics Anonymous, saying if you've got a problem with alcohol, that we can help. But if you want to carry on, it's up to you. Anyway, I cut that advertisement out of the local rag, and I put it in my bedside cabinet. And 3 months later, I picked it out and I made that phone call to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I was full of fear, full of anxiety. This was really going to be the first time that I'd outed myself about my drinking. And I didn't really want to stop, but I didn't really want to carry on either, because it was just, I could see the damage that it was causing to other people that were around me. And in the meantime, there was a whole raft of activities that happened that I don't need to go on to here. I don't need to explain here. But so I made this phone call, and the phone was ringing, and I was just about to put it down. The guy answered the phone. His name was Terry McGrath, by the way. He's dead now, so he won't mind me mentioning his name. And he said, and I said to him, "Oh, sorry, I didn't know his name, but I said, sorry, pal, I've rung the wrong number." And he just laughed. He said, "Hey, pal, nobody rings this number by mistake. Nobody." And he said, "What can I do to help you?" And I said to him, "Well, I've got a drinking problem." He said, "Right." I lived in a really small town then. So he come around to my house, and he just walked in like he owned the place. He was like one of those little cock bantams that you see strolling around in the yard. And he was really self-assured. He was confident. He was dressed nicely. He talked fast. And but he captivated my interest straight away. And he said to me, "Well, I'm going to a meeting tonight. How about you come with me?" And I agreed. And I'm glad I did agree, but at the time I was also scared as well and full of fear. But we got into his car, and we were going to a place called Ashburton, which was 100 clicks away from where we lived. So this is just, and I'm telling the story of a man that 12-stepped me, right? Obviously. So and he drove really fast, and he wouldn't shut the F up all the way there. He just continuously was just talking, and I was sweating, and it was wintertime, and I was in fear and anxiety. We got to the meeting. Small meeting, church hall. 6 people there, I think, 6 or 7 people there. The last speaker addressed me to my face, and he said to me, and he looked me straight in the eye and said, "Travis, if you don't pick up that first drink, you can't pick up the second one." And I just about fell off my chair. Boom. The lights went on inside my head. I'd been looking for a way out for quite a long time. And here was the answer. Here was the answer. I knew straight away. Don't ask me how I know this, but I knew instantly that I just didn't need to pick up another drink. And that's proved to be correct from that day to this day. So I'm very fortunate in that way. However, that wasn't the end of the story. I had no previous experience of Alcoholics Anonymous. I hadn't read the book, so I didn't know what the book was all about. I knew nothing of alcoholism. All as I knew was that I had a problem with alcohol and I couldn't stop drinking. I was absolutely out of control with my drinking. And I wasn't really offered at that time any kind of guidance or help to stay stopped. All as I was told was is to go to meetings as often as you can go. I did buy a big book, read the book, and try and help somebody else. So that was my kind of broad introduction into Alcoholics Anonymous at the time. And I did try those things, right? I seriously did try some of those things. I kept going back to meetings. I was the person that was happy, really, really happy not to be drinking, to have that monkey off my back. I was really so happy to do that. I felt as though I was becoming a little bit useful again. But I'll talk a little bit later about these bedevilments that we talk about. And But then the reality was, I just wore my wife out.
5 minutes, Travis.
Wow. 5 minutes already. Okay. Woo, woo. Man. So I'm going to talk about those bedevilments straight away. So I'm going to morph right into Big Book Step Study some 40 years later. Okay. And that's a hell of a transition, right? So, and so I got into a whole lot of trouble again, right? Through another addiction. And I was seeking help, really, really wanted help badly. I was facing some serious problems and went to my first Big Book Step Study meeting, of the men's Swampscott meeting, and I heard people talking with a different language, different from the language that I was hearing around Open Alcoholics Anonymous, and I was just blown away. And I seriously was looking for help, so I asked a man to, I said I was looking for help. The man gave me a telephone number, and I spoke to this man, and he gave me another telephone number. And then I got connected with a guy that said, yeah, I can help. Rock up to this meeting at this time. And he says, what you really got to do is ask somebody. So I put it out there at the next meeting that I went to. This man happened to be there and says, put his hand up straight away and said, yes, I can help. Right. So we began this process. We did the reading. I did the writing. I did the sharing. I was willing to have all these objectionable things removed from me that I had, and I still am. And I was humbly asking God to remove all those defects of character that I've got inside of me. Now, I know there is a solution here. We're talking about there is a solution. I have come to believe in a power greater than myself. It didn't come easily to me. It really didn't come easily to me. And I really looked at those words in page 46 in the chapter to the agnostics. And I just want to read that because it's important to me. It's impossible for any of us to fully define or comprehend that power which is God. That's what broke the back of my obstinacy, right? That's what really broke the back of my obstinacy to try and manage it by myself. I'd been self-sufficient for all those years, and now I was being asked to turn my life and my will over to a power that I didn't understand. I still don't understand. I have no idea what it is. I can't touch, smell, identify with this power at all. But what I have in spades is the willingness to believe. And that was all I needed, was just the willingness to believe that this power could indeed help me. And it's helped me through this process. And when I say I'm living in the latter steps, steps 10, 11, and 12, it says in that step also that I'm now living in the world of the spirit, right? And I'd never had that before. So I have a daily practice now of living in this world of the spirit. I've been transformed by doing this process. I have had some kind of miraculous recovery that's gone on in my life because I've participated in the work. So I didn't come here looking for a spiritual solution. I came here looking for relief. What I found, though, by doing the work, I've had a spiritual experience. And as a result of this experience, I've also had a spiritual awakening. And the awakening is that I do have the power to help somebody else to recover through my own story. So I'm sorry if I got a little bit jumbled up and went all over the place, but that's how it is. I feel pretty comfortable with what I shared. So I think I'll just leave it there, Chris, and thanks for asking me. And sorry I went over time.